Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melissa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to this week's episode. I'm so thrilled you're here as always, and I look forward to diving into this topic with you today about overcoming consulting proposal procrastination. So many alliterations today in the content. Bear with me. What we're talking about today is overcoming consulting proposal procrastination. So if you're like a lot of consultants, you don't love writing consulting proposals. And today I want to really share with you why that is. A lot of times we think it's, just how it is, and it doesn't have to be. And so that's what I really want to work with you on today is how to overcome that consulting proposal procrastination, because it doesn't have to be an activity that you dread in your business or that you avoid until the last minute. So the reason why this topic came up is I was working with a client this week who was just kind of struggling to finish a proposal, and it was a little bit last minute. And to be honest, this could be any client I'm discussing right now because almost everyone falls into this boat, and you probably have at times, or maybe you do every single time with your proposals, just like this client was having the challenge. And so as we started working together, we started off with just the kind of the components of, the proposal and reviewing. I was helping her review the proposal and giving her feedback on some adjustments that she could make, more on a strategy perspective and even just the tactics of the proposal. But as we started digging into it, we realized that there's something underneath it that is so much, in addition to, what we were doing, can be so much more valuable for her, both for this particular proposal and for the long run. And that is about the root cause of why she was procrastinating and a lot of the thoughts that she had about this proposal and proposals in general. And once we were able to identify those and address them, and I'll walk you through what that looks like today in a framework for you. But once we were able to really identify that it wasn't the, kind of the mechanics of the proposal or even her questioning about pricing or contents of the proposal, it wasn't any of that. It was the layer underneath that and a lot of the thinking that she had about proposals that was creating that drag, that lack of motivation to do the proposal that was really inhibiting her from getting more creative as she was writing the proposal. And so that's what was creating the procrastination for her and ultimately really watering down her product. And so today I want to walk you through a process so that you can identify why you are procrastinating and then give you a formula to overcome that procrastination. So that's what we're up to today. Glad you're here. Before we dive in, be sure to go take the Independent Consultants Pricing Scorecard if you haven't done so already. It's at icpricing.com, which is 2 letters for independent consultant, icpricing.com. And that goes perfectly with today's episode because it will help you to identify the areas of your process where you've got some room for improvement in your pricing strategy, which of course is one of the backbones of writing a proposal. So with that, let's dive into give you the agenda for today, and then we'll start talking about the first step. So today's focus, the formula to overcome proposal procrastination. We're going to talk about the root cause of your procrastination, just like I was kind of touching on a moment ago with the story of that client. And then I'll work with you on the solution to overcome your proposal procrastination, which I call the 4-component pre-proposal protocol. I told you there's going to be a lot of alliteration today. So with that, those are the 2 agenda items for today. Let's start with the root cause of your procrastination. We always procrastinate because we want to either avoid a feeling or we're having a feeling. So let me tell you more about what I mean by that. Most of the time, we're avoiding writing a proposal because we want to avoid feeling inadequate, or we want to avoid feeling unsure or self doubt or overwhelm. That's another really big one. We want to avoid feeling bad. We don't want to feel overwhelmed or inadequate, of course, right? And so as a result, at a a psychological level, we avoid doing the work because we don't want to feel those things. But ultimately, we end up feeling those things plus others, right? Regret, regret, and self loathing. So it compounds itself if we decide to go down that path of procrastination. But, in the meantime, our primitive brain is really wanting to avoid feeling that inadequacy, that self doubt, that overwhelm. And so when we think about it from that perspective, that we take every action or we avoid every action because of a feeling. The root cause of you, when you're wanting to avoid or defer or delay, put off to the last minute your consulting proposal, it comes down to two things. It comes down to the way that you're thinking about the proposal and the things around the proposal. I'll give you examples here in a minute. It comes down to the way you're thinking and ultimately what feelings those are generating. And so from that, let me give you a few examples. So the client that I was discussing with you earlier, sharing with you earlier, we realized when we started digging into her proposal, concerns that she was having and the help that she was wanting. We were kind of redlining her proposal and talking about strategy. And as we started digging into it, we realized that she was writing this proposal and crafting this proposal off of a thought pattern that had components like, I'm not good at this. Let's start there. I'm not good at this. If you're listening to this, have had those types of thoughts in the past too. I'm just not good at this. Like, proposals are not something I'm good at. And it sounds very factual. Like, you're just telling me the fact. I'm not good at this. But the truth is that that is not a fact. It is a thought process that you've created for yourself. Likely it's your brain trying to get you to avoid doing the job. And so you tell yourself over and over again, I'm not good at this. This isn't my strength. This isn't my strong suit. I'm better at client delivery. We tell ourselves these things all the time. And what that ends up doing is creating a thought, a identity really of I'm not good at creating proposals. It creates it into feeling like it is a fact that you're not good at proposals. And of course you would want to avoid them if you don't think you're good at it. We love doing things we're good at and that feel natural to us and feel comfortable to us versus things that we feel that we're not good at or we think we're not good at, and therefore we feel inadequate to do them. And so the root cause is not that you're not good at writing a proposal or writing proposals. The root cause is that you're thinking that you're not good at it. And you're not giving yourself the opportunity to see any alternatives. So with this client, we dove in and started talking about how is she good at this? How really exploring the alternatives, right? Once we uncovered her thought process, again, not a fact, her thought process that she's not good at this, then we were able to really explore alternatives as to how that's not true. And even if it is true, just for sake of argument, even if it is true, what are some alternatives she could be thinking, such as, is possible I can get good at this, that will help her to lighten up the pressure and be able to move forward with creating the proposal? Do you see the difference between that thought process? I'm not good at this. When I say that out loud, I just kind of seize up. It feels so horrible. I don't like not being good at things. You're probably the same way. Versus, it's possible I can get good at this. It feels so much lighter and almost inspiring a little bit. I want to get good at something. Do you see the difference there? Do you see why the root cause of your thinking is what is creating this drag? What is creating this procrastination? Let me give you another example. As we were thinking about really three areas of her thought process, is what it came down to: herself, writing proposals. I'm not good at this. The second was her thoughts about proposals. This won't go anywhere. When you're writing a proposal and thinking this won't go anywhere, or thinking this isn't as good as someone else's proposal, I bet this isn't going to be as good as someone else's proposal if you know other people are proposing to the potential client, of course you're going to want to procrastinate. Starting off a proposal process thinking this won't go anywhere, of course you're not going to want to do it. We don't want to do things that aren't going to succeed. Why would you think that about yourself? And of course, it's natural to think it just by default. That's what she was doing. She didn't even realize she was thinking that until we started uncovering it. And you may be the same way. This won't go anywhere. When you think about your proposal as this won't go anywhere, of course, that would be a common root cause of you procrastinating. We always take action of things that will make us feel good. And so when we think this proposal isn't going to go anywhere and it feels bad, of course, we're going to procrastinate. So you see the root cause here. The root cause of the thinking comes from the thinking about her, the thinking about you. Are you thinking, I'm not good at these, like she was? Are you thinking this proposal isn't going to go anywhere, or this proposal isn't good enough, or I'm doing this wrong? Of course, if those are the things you're thinking, which likely happens for you as a default, of course you're going to procrastinate. This isn't going to be good. Of course you're going to procrastinate. The third area that we found for her that is something you'll want to explore too is her thinking about the client. When we started about the potential client that was attached to this proposal, right? Her thought process was something around the lines of, they won't like this. This won't be good enough for them. Again, of course, you're not going to want to write the proposal if your thought process is, the client isn't going to like this. The client isn't going to think this is good enough. The potential client is going to be disappointed. Of course, you're going to procrastinate if those are the types of thoughts you have. And left unmanaged, unexamined, those are the types of thoughts you're likely going to have. I know this because, number one, you're listening to this podcast. So you are an independent consultant who is really interested in running a really high quality business where you're making money and you're making impact and you're pushing yourself. You're pushing yourself to grow. Of course, I can easily guess that these types of things are happening for you. If you were just the consultant who was willing to take whatever work came across your desk and do whatever someone asks you to do without really pushing yourself to grow and scale and evolve yourself and your business, you wouldn't be here. So it's easy for me to assume that these are the types of thoughts that you have in your mind as an independent consultant who is pushing yourself and wanting to grow your business and wanting to get better at these types of things like writing proposals. Of course, this is what happens to us when we're growing, when we're trying to learn new skills. And so these are the thought processes that will come up naturally when you're learning something new or becoming better at something. And if left unchecked, that it's going to be miserable for you in your business. And I don't want that. And I know you don't want either. So that is the root cause of proposal procrastination, which is, again, your thinking, the way you're thinking about yourself, the way you're thinking about your proposals, the way you're thinking about the potential clients and their view of your proposal or what they will view in your proposal. Those are the root causes. When those are lower quality, when those are default thinking versus intentional thinking, when those thoughts are left unexamined, that is what is causing drag on your business. I like to describe it as kind of pressing the gas and the brake at the same time. Those thoughts that are running in your subconscious are what is creating this drag, this procrastination. So knowing that is the first step of this overcoming proposal procrastination. So now let's dive into what I shared with you earlier. I'm calling it the 4 components pre-proposal protocol. This is the solution to those root causes. The four components are really, I'll tell you what they are, and then I'll give you more, go back and go through each one in more detail. So the four components are, number one, do you have your prerequisites in place? And then number two, do you have intentional thinking about yourself in place? And you can write this in advance. You can do this right now, even if you don't have a proposal that you need to write on, in your queue. I suggest writing this right now so that you have it ready as a go-to way before you need to write a proposal. So you can just pull it out and say, you know what, this is what I do before I write proposals, and get yourself into a much more intentional place. Okay, so let's go back to the four things. With that being said, number one, you've got your prerequisites in place. Number two, you have created intentional thinking about yourself. Number three, you've created intentional thinking about the proposal. And number four, you've created intentional thinking about the potential client. Okay, so we're diving into each one of these four components. So the first is, do you have your prerequisites in place? So again, if you're defining this pre-proposal protocol, I would sit down and figure out, what are my prerequisites? What do I need to know from a potential client and from myself in order to write a proposal? A couple of examples would be, do I know why they want the work that I'm proposing? A lot of times we overlook this or don't go deep enough. Why do they truly want this proposal? Why do they want you to do the type of work that you're proposing? What is the impact on their organization and on them personally, whomever you're writing that, whoever your buyer is? What is the value to them? And getting yourself really clear on what are those things that you need to know in order to write a proposal. A lot of times we jump into writing a proposal because either someone asked us to, and so we, without really examining it, we agree to write the proposal. And then when we sit down to write it, or when we're thinking about writing it, we realize we don't have all the information we need or really understand the details and why they want it, the impact they're looking for, the value that you'll bring as part of the work. And so then we feel stuck, right? Feel stuck because we said we would write a proposal, but now we realize we were a little bit premature in agreeing to do that. So really understanding for yourself, what are those prerequisites that you need to know in order to write a proposal, in order to be ready to write a proposal. Having those prerequisites defined in advance really helps to inform your process as well. The way that you're engaging with that potential client, asking them questions, getting deeper into the challenges that they're having. So document for yourself, what are those prerequisites? Some of it will be knowledge, what the things that you need to know about the organization and about your, the people sponsoring the project in the company that you're working with. And then other things are more process related. Like, for example, you might put in your prerequisite list that you want to have already built some kind of a relationship with the decision makers, or you want to have cultivated what I call an internal coach, someone you can run ideas by that'll give you advice and give you feedback without, as you're doing things like writing the proposal. So think about, for you in your business, first and foremost, I just gave you a lot of examples. What are the prerequisites I need to have in place before I will sit down and write a proposal? Now, you might find yourself in the place where you don't have those every single time. And that's not a problem either. Don't make yourself this unwieldy checklist that if you don't have it, you don't feel like you can move forward. That's not what we're trying to do here. But what we're trying to do is to say, let's just slow down for a minute and figure out what are the prerequisites I need to have in place so that I'm not prematurely offering proposals. If for some reason you don't have all of them every single time, not a problem. Don't use that as source for procrastination. That's what we're trying to overcome here. So let me share with you these next three components, and some of them, all of them really, will help you to overcome that perfectionism. Like, I need to have everything in place in order to write a proposal successfully. Or I need to feel like I'm good at this in order to write a proposal successfully. We don't want you into that spot. Again, the pre-proposal protocol is something you want to be writing before you have proposals on your desk. The first component of that is, or in your queue, the first component of that is knowing what your ideal prerequisites are, knowing that your goal is to get all of them. But if for some reason you find yourself in the spot where you don't have all of them, that you're going to keep moving forward. The second component is writing in advance how you want to think about yourself. So again, this is overcoming the root cause of the default thoughts you may be having, such as, I'm not good at this. So you want to write down an intentional, purposeful thought. Think on purpose, literally read the thought and think it on purpose as you're getting ready to write a proposal writing in your calendar, and you sit down and you really think about yourself for a moment in relation to this proposal and purposefully crafting what are the thoughts I want to think about myself instead of I'm not good at this. Something like I'm becoming great at this. Does that feel believable to you? I'm becoming good at this. Does that feel believable to you? You want to think a thought on purpose or plan out a thought on purpose that feels believable, that feels lighter, that doesn't create the resistance and ultimately the procrastination that your default thinking creates. You might think something like, I write a better proposal every time. I'm getting better at this. Doesn't that feel lighter than I'm not good at this? Doesn't that open the door to you doing the actual proposal versus deferring it or delaying it and waiting until the last minute? So you want to, in advance, write down a plan of how you're going to think about yourself and test those thoughts to make sure that they create a feeling that is motivating, that is light, that is believable, that will help you to overcome the overwhelm and the self-doubt and the second guessing that just happens by default in your human brain. So that's the second component of your pre-proposal protocol. The first component was really knowing what those prerequisites are and getting as many as you can in place without needing them to be perfect, but having, those prerequisites in place to set yourself up for success. The second component was to really document purposeful thoughts you're going to think on purpose about yourself in relation to this protocol to generate feelings like motivated or inspired or even just neutral. Feeling neutral is much better than feeling resistance or avoidance. So that's all we're trying to do is get ourselves into an emotional state that then allows us to move forward with a proposal. And that emotional state is really important because think about it. If you're sitting down to write a proposal and you're saying to yourself, I'm not good at this, they're not going to want it, I'm just checking, I'm just got to do this because I said I would. Those emotions and that emotional energy with which you're writing the proposal, it's kind of like Eeyore. That's the Winnie the Pooh character, right? Like you're just doing it, kind of plodding through the motions with this sort of that dynamic I was describing earlier, the brakes and the gas on at the same time. Imagine the tenor with which that proposal comes out, the tenor, the tone, the vibe that you're putting on the piece of paper versus getting yourself into thought process, like thinking about yourself, like I'm getting better at this every time. I'm excited to do work with this client. This client is going to want this proposal. Think about the words that you end up choosing to put on the piece of paper when you're in that mental model and that emotional zone versus thinking about it as I have to do this. I hate it, but I'll do it anyway. It can be very subtle, but it can be the entire difference. And that's what I said to this client as I was working with her. I said, look, I know the proposal is due tomorrow, but if nothing else, sit down and think about this as I truly want to help this client. And she does. I'm excited. The client wants this proposal and make the process lighter for yourself as a result. And also put the tone, ends up influencing the tone of the proposal in a subtle yet incredibly impactful way. So that's why it's so important to get your thought process and your emotional state in order at the highest level that you can get it to in order to make the difference of the work that you're doing as you write the proposal. Okay, so I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's really important to emphasize why you want to be doing this pre-proposal protocol and why the components of the pre-proposal protocol that I'm sharing with you will make a difference for you in terms of whether the proposal is accepted or whether the proposal might not be accepted because you have watered it down or not put that energy and vibration into it. That could be the tipping point. Okay, so let's just recap again. We've talked about two components so far of the pre-proposal protocol. Number one, you've got the prerequisites in place as best you can. Again, we're not going for perfection, but just spending some time intentionally figuring out what those are and getting them into place is really vital. Number two, you've created what I call a thought plan. You've created a thought plan about how you're going to think about yourself in relation to the proposal. Number three, you are created an intentional plan about how you're going to think about the proposal itself. So in this pre-proposal protocol, write down, how am I as a business owner going to think about proposals? Every time I'm going to think about proposals, I dread these, I hate these, I'm bad at these. Of course, that's going to create procrastination by default. Again, going back to the root cause. What we're trying to do here in the pre-proposal protocol is design the way you want to think about the proposals intentionally. Intentionally design the way you want to think about the proposals, in other words. So you might consider on your pre-proposal protocol writing down, this proposal is a step in the process. It's for discussion. It isn't a make it or break it situation. That might lighten up for you the feelings that are creating procrastination. Or this will be just what they need is another example of what you might write on your pre-proposal protocol. Getting into intentional thinking about the proposal itself. So you want to come up with, what are my specific thoughts I'm going to think about this proposal on purpose, rather than in place of whatever might be happening by default in your brain. So on purpose, what do you want to think about the proposal? Thinking about the proposal of, this is just what they need. They're going to love this. This proposal is a step in the process. It's not my last step and either make it or break it, right? So for you, think about, what do I need to think about the proposal itself in order to create an emotional experience of openness or neutrality or even feeling inspired versus dread and overwhelm and self-doubt. So that's what you're going to want to write next. That's the third component of your pre-proposal protocol. How do you want to think about the proposal itself? And then finally, you're going to want to write down on purpose ahead of time, how are you going to think about the potential clients? So we talked earlier about one of the root causes of proposal procrastination is thinking about the client. They're not going to like this. They're going to think this isn't as good as someone else's. Again, that thought process creates procrastination. What you want to do in your pre-proposal protocol is to say, what do I want to think about the client that best serves me, that gives myself the benefit of the doubt? So an example could be, potential client wants this proposal. The potential client can't wait to see this proposal. The potential client will be thrilled to see this proposal. So those are the four components. So sit down for yourself today and sketch out, what is my pre-proposal protocol? Again, the four components are, what prerequisites do I need in order to write a protocol? Again, these are guidelines. These are not, I have to have all of these or I'm not going to do it. Don't use it against yourself. But what are your prerequisites that you want to have in place? And then number two, how are you going to intentionally think about yourself in relation to the protocol? Number three, how are you going to intentionally think about the proposal itself? And number four, how are you going to intentionally think about the potential client? So write those down. And then next time you have a proposal that you need to write, that you've committed to writing, that you're excited to give to your potential client, that's going to be your guideline. That's going to be your guidance. You're going to want to read the sentences out loud to yourself and say, really get into that emotional state of excitement and inspiredness and even fun instead of dread and self-doubt and second guessing. That is the process for you to put this pre-proposal process in place and ultimately overcome the procrastination. Now, the last thing I'll share with you today is you still in the moment may not want to do the actual proposal. And so regardless of how many protocols you put in place, we just don't want to do stuff, right? We'd rather do things that are comfortable. So here's my last tip for you today. Put it on your calendar. Whenever the proposal needs to get done, pre-schedule it. Sit down at your desk when you've got that block of time and purposefully implement the protocol that you've written through the guidance on this podcast. And then go get yourself into that emotional state, the feeling of excitement, the feeling of commitment, the feeling of, kind of inspiration for this potential client, and then start writing. Give yourself some space, give yourself some time to edit it, put another block on your calendar to edit it, and then send it knowing that it's a living document. It doesn't have to be the make it or break it. You're not submitting an RFP. This can be ideally a formality, helping the client to choose one of several options you might be proposing, or it might be another step in the process. So take some pressure off yourself, but put it in your calendar and then be committed to yourself as a business owner that you're going to follow the calendar using this pre-proposal protocol that I've shared with you today to really make the process less daunting and more inspired. All right. So that's what I have for you today. Hopefully this helps you to better understand why you're procrastinating or wanting to avoid or dreading your proposals, the root causes of that, and gives you some tools to start overcoming that so that your proposals can be more impactful and not such a dreaded aspect of your business. All right. Thanks for tuning in. And don't forget to go take the IC pricing assessment at icpricing.com. And we'll put the link in the show notes. And I will see you again next week. Take care.
Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.